The radar screen painted lies across the Afghan sky at 3:47 hours. Major Kestrel Whisper Nakamura watched the green blips dance in formation, her weathered fingers drumming against the console in the operations bunker. Something was wrong with the geometry. The enemy jets were maintaining perfect triangulation, their spacing mathematically precise, yet their trajectory made no tactical sense. They were heading toward the Kunar Valley, where nothing but rocks and goat herders waited in the pre-dawn darkness. "Whisper, you seeing this?" Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed's voice crackled through the comm, his tone carrying the familiar edge of a man who'd learned to trust his gut over his instruments. The base commander had pulled himself from his rack to study the anomaly, coffee steam rising from his mug like incense in the sterile air. Kestrel's dark eyes remained fixed on the screen, her expression unreadable. At 34, she'd flown more combat sorties than most pilots would see in their entire careers, yet the brass still treated her like a novelty. The first Japanese-American woman to fly the F-16 in active combat, she'd earned her call sign not from her quiet demeanor, but from her ability to slip through enemy airspace like a ghost. Now, grounded by a shoulder injury that refused to heal properly, she found herself analyzing patterns instead of creating them. "Sir, their formation is too clean," she said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd stared death in the face and found it wanting. "Nobody flies that tight unless they're showing off or—" She paused, studying the data streaming across multiple screens. "Or unless they're not who they appear to be." The bunker fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant rumble of a C-130 preparing for takeoff. Reed set down his coffee, the ceramic clicking against the metal desk like a countdown timer. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to bleed across the eastern peaks, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Explain," Reed ordered, though his tone suggested he already suspected where her analysis was heading. Kestrel's fingers flew across the keyboard, overlaying flight patterns from the past 6 months. "Look at the spacing, sir. Exactly 47 meters apart, altitude differential of 12 feet. That's not combat formation, that's air show precision. And the lead aircraft." She highlighted the forward blip, her brow furrowing as she processed the implications. "That's not showing up on secondary radar. No transponder signal, no IFF response. It's like it doesn't exist." The mystery deepened as she pulled up historical data, her trained eye catching anomalies that would have escaped lesser analysts. This wasn't just another Taliban raid or foreign incursion. This was something else entirely, something that would test every skill she'd learned in the cockpit and every instinct she'd developed over a career spent proving herself in a world that questioned her right to be there. The morning sun climbed higher, but the shadows in the operations bunker seemed to grow longer, as if the very air was holding its breath for what was to come. Kestrel's finger hovered over the emergency alert button, knowing that once she pressed it, there would be no turning back. The curve of destiny was about to reveal itself, and with it, the truth about the pilot who had saved them, all without anyone knowing his name. Reed's radio crackled to life, breaking the tension. "Bagram Control, this is Falcon Lead. We have visual on the unknowns. Request immediate identification assistance. These birds don't match anything in our threat database." The game was about to begin, and Kestrel Nakamura was about to discover that some ghosts from the past never truly disappear. They just wait for the right moment to return home. "Captain Jake, Viper." Morrison's voice carried across the radio waves with the kind of controlled urgency that came from too many combat missions and too few peaceful nights. His F-16 cut through the morning air at 28,000 feet, the desert stretching endlessly below like a canvas painted in shades of brown and gold. Behind him, his wingman Lieutenant Sarah, Phoenix, Chen maintained perfect formation, her aircraft's shadow dancing across the rocky terrain. "Bagram Control, Falcon Lead. I'm getting intermittent radar contact on the bogies. They're playing games with us up here." Morrison's gloved hand gripped the stick tighter as he banked left, trying to get a better visual on the mysterious formation. The sun painted his canopy in brilliant streaks of light, forcing him to rely on his instruments more than his eyes. In the bunker, Kestrel's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up Morrison's flight data in real time. She'd flown with Viper before her injury, knew his tendencies and his tells. He was good, damn good, but he was also impatient, the kind of pilot who trusted his instincts over his instruments. That combination had saved his life more than once, but it had also gotten him into trouble with the brass. Falcon lead, maintain your current heading. We're working on identification from down here. Reed's voice carried the weight of command, but Kestrel could hear the uncertainty underneath. The colonel was a transport pilot by training, more comfortable with logistics than dogfights. He knew enough to trust his pilots, but not enough to guide them through the maze of aerial chess that was unfolding above. Kestrel leaned forward, studying the data stream from Morrison's aircraft. Something was wrong with the picture. The enemy formation was still maintaining that impossible precision, but now she could see micro-adjustments in their flight paths, tiny corrections that suggested they were being flown by someone with extraordinary skill. This wasn't some hastily assembled strike force. This was artistry in motion. "Sir, I need to talk to Falcon Lead directly," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the operations center. Reed hesitated, his eyes meeting hers across the banks of glowing screens. Protocol dictated that all air-to-ground communication went through the duty controller, but protocol hadn't anticipated this situation. "Do it," he said finally. Kestrel keyed her microphone, her voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. "Falcon Lead, this is Whisper. I'm painting a picture down here that doesn't make sense. Your bogies are flying in perfect formation, but they're not responding to any of our identification protocols. I need you to get close enough for a visual but stay sharp. Something's not right about this whole setup." Morrison's reply came back immediately, his voice tight with concentration. "Copy that, Whisper. Always trust your gut, right? That's what you taught me about reading the sky. Phoenix and I are moving to intercept. We'll have eyes on in 2 minutes." The reference to their shared training sessions wasn't lost on Kestrel. Morrison had been one of the few pilots who'd never questioned her abilities, who'd listened when she talked about the subtle art of reading an opponent's intentions through their flight patterns. Now, grounded and watching from below, she found herself in the unusual position of being his eyes and ears. "Falcon Lead, be advised, the lead aircraft in their formation isn't showing up on secondary radar. That could mean electronic warfare capabilities or," she paused, running through the possibilities in her mind. "Or it could mean something else entirely. Stay flexible up there." The radio crackled with atmospheric interference, and for a moment, the only sound in the bunker was the hum of cooling fans and the distant rumble of jet engines. Then Morrison's voice cut through the static, carrying a note of disbelief that made everyone in the operations center look up from their screens. "Whisper, I have visual contact on the unknowns, and you're not going to believe what I'm seeing up here." The tension in the bunker became palpable as every operator leaned forward, waiting for Morrison's report. Kestrel's hand moved instinctively to her shoulder, where the old injury still ached on mornings like this. She'd given up flying for moments like these, where her analytical mind could see patterns that others missed. Now, listening to the pilot she'd once mentored, she felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. Outside, the sun continued its arc across the Afghan sky, indifferent to the drama playing out in the thin air above. But inside the operations bunker, time seemed to slow as they waited for Morrison to describe what he was seeing. The mystery was about to deepen, and with it, the realization that some battles were fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with memory and recognition. The silence stretched on, broken only by the steady beep of radar sweeps and the soft whisper of air conditioning. Then Morrison's voice returned, carrying a weight that suggested the world had just shifted on its axis. "Bagram Control, Falcon Lead, the lead aircraft. It's an F-16, but not like any variant I've ever seen, and whoever's flying it knows exactly what they're doing. Morrison's F-16 banked hard left, the G-forces pressing him deep into his ejection seat as he maneuvered for a better angle on the mystery formation. The morning sun caught the leading aircraft's canopy, sending brilliant reflections across the cloudless sky. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat, the sleek lines of an F-16, but modified in ways that defied conventional wisdom. Falcon Lead, describe what you're seeing. Reed's voice crackled through the calm, the tension evident even through the static. Morrison's eyes swept over the aircraft, taking in details that would have been invisible to anyone but a pilot. The wing configuration was standard, but the fuselage had been stretched slightly, accommodating what appeared to be additional fuel tanks or electronics. The paint scheme was unlike anything in the standard inventory, a deep charcoal gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No national markings, no squadron insignia, nothing to identify its origin or purpose. It's definitely an F-16, but it's been heavily modified, Morrison reported, his voice steady despite the implications. Extended fuselage, non-standard avionics pod, and the pilot. He paused, trying to process what he was seeing. The pilot is flying it like it's an extension of their body. Perfect stick and rudder control, no wasted movement. Whoever's up there is better than good. They're exceptional. In the bunker, Kestrel's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up technical specifications for every F-16 variant ever produced. Nothing matched what Morrison was describing. The aircraft he was seeing didn't exist in any official database, yet there it was, leading a formation through Afghan airspace with the confidence of someone who owned the sky. Falcon Lead, attempt radio contact on guard frequency, she instructed, her analytical mind working through the possibilities. If they're flying American aircraft, they might respond to standard protocols. Morrison switched to the emergency frequency, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Unknown aircraft, this is U.S. Air Force Falcon Lead. You are in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately and state your intentions. The response came back immediately, spoken in accented English with the calm professionalism of a career military pilot. Falcon Lead, this is Ghost Lead. We are conducting a training exercise. Request permission to continue our mission. The voice sent a chill down Kestrel's spine. There was something familiar about it, something that triggered a memory she couldn't quite place. The accent was indeterminate, could have been European, could have been something else entirely. But the tone, the cadence, the way the words were chosen and delivered. It reminded her of someone, though she couldn't say who. Ghost Lead, you are not authorized for training exercises in this airspace. Identify your unit and commanding officer immediately, Morrison responded, his F-16 closing the distance to the mysterious formation. The reply came back with a hint of what might have been amusement. Falcon Lead, authorization was granted at a level above your clearance. We will complete our exercise and depart your airspace momentarily. Reed's fist slammed against the desk, the sound echoing through the bunker. Like hell they will. Falcon Lead, escort them out of restricted airspace. Use minimum force necessary, but make it clear they're not welcome here. Morrison acknowledged the order, but as he maneuvered his aircraft into an escort position, something unexpected happened. The mystery formation began to break apart, not in panic or confusion, but with the practiced precision of an aerial demonstration team. The lead aircraft, Ghost Lead, peeled away from the group, climbing at an impossible angle that should have stalled any conventional F-16. Jesus, Morrison breathed, his voice barely audible over the radio. He's pulling at least 9 GS in that climb. That's not possible with a standard F-16. Kestrel watched the radar display, her mind racing through the implications. The aircraft Morrison was describing couldn't exist, yet there it was, defying the laws of physics and challenging everything she thought she knew about air combat. The pilot flying it wasn't just skilled, they were operating on a level that transcended normal human capability. "Falcon lead, stay with them," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chatter. "I want to know where they're going and what they're planning. Something about this whole situation feels orchestrated." As Morrison's F-16 climbed in pursuit, the mystery deepened. The unknown aircraft seemed to be leading them somewhere specific, following a flight path that was too precise to be random. They were being drawn into something, but what? And why? The sun climbed higher in the Afghan sky, its light revealing the vast emptiness of the landscape below. But in the air above, a game was being played with stakes that none of them yet understood. The curve of destiny was beginning to reveal itself, and with it, the truth about the pilot who had once saved them all. The pursuit continued across the endless sky, each moment bringing them closer to answers, and closer to a reckoning that would change everything they thought they knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and the price of freedom. The modified F-16 climbed through 35,000 feet, its pilot maintaining a rate of ascent that should have been impossible for the aircraft's power plant. Morrison's instruments screamed warnings as he pushed his own F-16 to its limits, trying to match the mysterious aircraft's performance. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cockpit's cooling system, and his oxygen mask felt tight against his face. "Falcon lead, you're approaching service ceiling," Phoenix warned from her position 2 miles behind. Chen's voice carried the concern of a pilot who'd seen too many aircraft pushed beyond their limits. "That guy's flying like he's got a rocket strapped to his ass." Morrison's eyes never left the aircraft ahead of him, studying its every movement with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. The pilot, Ghost Lead, was executing maneuvers that belonged in a test pilot's handbook, not in standard air-to-air combat. Banking turns at angles that should have resulted in a stall, maintaining airspeed through climbs that defied conventional aerodynamics. It was like watching someone rewrite the rules of physics in real time. "Whisper, are you getting this telemetry?" Morrison's voice was tight with concentration as he fought to keep the mystery aircraft in sight. "My instruments are showing performance parameters that don't match any F-16 variant I've ever flown." In the bunker, Kestrel's screens painted a picture that challenged everything she thought she knew about aircraft limitations. The data streaming from Morrison's aircraft showed the unknown F-16 maintaining thrust-to-weight ratios that exceeded factory specifications by 30%. Either the aircraft had been modified with experimental technology, or the pilot was operating at a level of skill that compensated for aerodynamic impossibilities. "Falcon lead, maintain visual contact but don't try to match his performance," she advised, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned to trust data over instinct. "Let him show you what he can do. I have a feeling this is all part of whatever game he's playing." The mystery aircraft suddenly rolled inverted, its pilot executing a perfect split-S maneuver that would have been textbook perfect if not for the altitude and airspeed involved. Morrison watched in amazement as Ghost Lead pulled out of the dive barely 2,000 feet above the desert floor, his aircraft's wake creating tiny dust devils in the sand below. "Son of a bitch," Morrison muttered, his admiration evident despite the circumstances. "That was either the most skilled piece of flying I've ever seen or the most reckless, maybe both." The radio crackled with Ghost Lead's voice, calm and unruffled despite the aerobatic display he'd just performed. "Falcon lead, you fly with competence. Your instructor taught you well." The comment hit Morrison like a physical blow. There was something in the way Ghost Lead spoke about his training, a familiarity that suggested knowledge of his background that shouldn't have existed. Morrison's primary flight instructor had been a legend in the Air Force, a pilot whose reputation had been built on precise technique and unwavering professionalism. Only a handful of people would have known the specific methods and philosophy that had shaped Morrison's flying style. "Ghost Lead, identify your flight instructor," Morrison demanded, his voice carrying a new edge of urgency. How do you know about my training? The response came back immediately, spoken with the quiet confidence of someone revealing a long-held secret. Your instructor was Major Elena Vasquez, known as perfectionist for her attention to detail. She taught you to read the sky like a book, to anticipate your opponent's moves before they made them. She died in a training accident 6 years ago, but her techniques live on in every pilot she trained. Morrison's blood ran cold. The information was accurate, disturbingly so. Major Vasquez had indeed been his primary instructor, and her death had been classified due to the experimental nature of the aircraft she'd been testing. Only a handful of people would have known the details Ghost Lead had just revealed. "Who are you?" Morrison's voice was barely a whisper, but the radio picked up every word. "I am someone who owes a debt to Major Vasquez," Ghost Lead replied, his aircraft beginning a slow turn toward the east. "She saved my life once in ways that she never knew. Today, I have the opportunity to return that favor by saving yours." The cryptic comment sent chills down Morrison's spine. In the bunker, Kestrel leaned forward, her analytical mind working through the implications. The pilot calling himself Ghost Lead wasn't just skilled. He was connected to their community in ways that suggested a shared history, a common bond forged in the crucible of military aviation. "Falcon Lead, follow at distance," she advised, her voice carrying a note of caution. "This isn't a random encounter. He's leading us somewhere specific, and I have a feeling we're about to learn why." The formation continued eastward, flying over terrain that had seen countless battles and endless suffering. Below them, the Afghan landscape stretched endlessly, a testament to the persistence of human conflict and the courage of those who fought to bring peace to impossible places. But above, in the thin air where only the most skilled pilots dared to venture, a different kind of battle was being fought, one where the weapons were skill and knowledge, and the prize was understanding. Ghost Lead's aircraft began to descend, its pilots selecting a course that would take them toward the Pakistan border. The move was deliberate, calculated, designed to force a decision from the pursuing American pilots. Follow and risk an international incident. Turn back and lose the chance to solve the mystery that had brought them together. Morrison's choice was made before he consciously realized it. Whatever Ghost Lead's game was, wherever it led, he would see it through to the end. The curve of destiny was calling, and Jake Morrison had never been one to back down from a challenge. The descent began in earnest, two F-16s following a Ghost toward an uncertain future, while far below, the operations bunker buzzed with activity as analysts and commanders tried to make sense of an encounter that defied all logic and challenged every assumption about who controlled the skies above Afghanistan. Ghost Lead's aircraft descended through 20,000 feet, its pilot maintaining a glide path that was both graceful and purposeful. Morrison followed at a respectful distance, his eyes never leaving the mystery aircraft's distinctive silhouette. The modified F-16 seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light, its charcoal gray paint scheme making it difficult to track visually against the hazy sky. "Falcon Lead, you're approaching the Pakistan border," Phoenix's voice crackled through the radio, her concern evident. "We need to think about turning back soon." Morrison's jaw tightened. International boundaries were serious business, especially in this part of the world where political tensions ran high and military forces operated under strict rules of engagement. Crossing into Pakistani airspace without authorization could trigger a diplomatic incident that would reverberate all the way to Washington. "Ghost Lead, you're leading us into restricted airspace," Morrison transmitted, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the implications. "State your intentions immediately." The response came back with what sounded like genuine regret. "Falcon Lead, what I must show you lies beyond the boundary of maps and politics. Trust is required now, as it was required then. Will you follow where others have feared to go?" In the bunker, Kestrel's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up satellite imagery of the border region. The terrain below was a maze of valleys and ridges, perfect for hiding anything from weapons caches to entire military installations. If Ghost Lead was leading them into a trap, they would have precious little room to maneuver. "Falcon Lead, abort pursuit," Reed's voice cut through the radio traffic, carrying the authority of direct command. "Return to base immediately. We'll handle this through diplomatic channels." Morrison's hand hovered over his controls, torn between duty and curiosity. The pilot ahead of him had demonstrated skills that bordered on the supernatural, had revealed knowledge that should have been classified, and was now asking him to trust in something that defied every regulation and protocol he'd sworn to uphold. "Ghost Lead, give me a reason to trust you," Morrison said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that could end his career. The response came back immediately, spoken with quiet intensity. "Because 7 years ago, in the skis above Syria, an American pilot saved my life without knowing who I was or why I was there. He pulled me from a burning aircraft and carried me to safety, asking nothing in return. That pilot's call sign was Falcon Lead, and his real name was Captain Jake Morrison." Morrison's world tilted on its axis. 7 years ago, during a classified mission that officially never happened, he had indeed rescued a downed pilot from a burning aircraft. The man had been unconscious, his flight suit unmarked, his identity a mystery. Morrison had assumed he was a captured American or Allied pilot, had followed his training and his conscience, and had extracted him under heavy enemy fire. "That's impossible," Morrison breathed, his voice barely audible over the radio. "That pilot was—" he paused, memories flooding back. "That pilot was listed as killed in action. His body was never recovered." "Bodies are not recovered when they choose to disappear," Ghost Lead replied, his aircraft beginning a slow turn toward a narrow valley that cut deep into the mountainous terrain. "Follow me, Jake Morrison. It is time you learned the truth about the pilot you saved, and the debt that has waited 7 years to be repaid." The revelation hit Morrison like a physical blow. The mysterious pilot he'd rescued had been flying a modified F-16 similar to the one now leading him toward the Pakistan border. The aircraft had been experimental, its existence classified at levels that exceeded Morrison's clearance. He'd never learned the pilot's identity, never discovered the purpose of his mission, never understood why the entire incident had been scrubbed from official records. "Falcon Lead, do not cross that border," Reed's voice crackled through the radio, carrying the desperate urgency of a commander who could see his pilot about to make a career-ending decision. "That's a direct order." Morrison's aircraft continued its descent, following Ghost Lead into the valley. The decision had been made not by conscious thought, but by something deeper, a recognition that some debts transcended regulations, that some truths were worth the risk of everything he'd worked to achieve. "Phoenix, RTB," Morrison transmitted to his wingman. "Tell them I'm following a lead that requires immediate investigation. I'll accept full responsibility for the consequences." Chen's F-16 peeled away reluctantly, her pilot's voice tight with frustration. "Jake, don't do this. Whatever he's showing you, it's not worth throwing away your career." But Morrison was already committed, his aircraft following Ghost Lead deeper into the valley, toward a truth that had been hidden in the shadows for 7 years. The curve of destiny was revealing itself, and with it, the understanding that some rescues created bonds that neither time nor distance could break. Behind them, the operations bunker erupted in controlled chaos as Reed tried to manage a situation that had spiraled beyond all prediction. But ahead, in the narrow valley where the borders of nations became meaningless, two pilots were about to discover that the greatest battles were sometimes fought not with weapons, but with the courage to confront the past and the wisdom to understand its meaning. The valley walls rose on either side like the ribs of some ancient beast, their rocky surfaces scarred by centuries of wind and weather. Morrison's F-16 followed Ghost Lead through the narrow passage, flying barely 300 feet above the valley floor. The modified aircraft ahead of him moved with the fluid grace of a pilot who knew these mountains intimately, banking and turning with subtle adjustments that suggested countless hours of practice in this exact terrain. "Ghost lead, where are you taking me?" Morrison's voice carried across the radio, echoing slightly in the confined space between the valley walls. The response came back immediately, spoken with the quiet authority of someone who had waited years for this moment. "To a place where the dead learn to live again, and where debts are finally paid in full. Look ahead, Jake Morrison. See what 7 years of gratitude can build." Morrison's eyes widened as the valley opened into a hidden basin, revealing a sight that defied every assumption about the region's geography and strategic importance. Cut into the mountainside was an airfield, its runway carved from solid rock and camouflaged so effectively that satellite imagery would have missed it entirely. Hangars had been built into the mountain itself, their entrances disguised as natural cave openings. The entire installation was a masterpiece of engineering and concealment, invisible from above and accessible only through the treacherous valley approach. "Jesus Christ," Morrison breathed, his voice barely audible over the radio. "How long has this been here?" "Construction began 8 years ago," Ghost Lead replied, his aircraft beginning its approach to the hidden runway. "It was completed 4 years ago, but has been operational in limited capacity since its inception. This is where the lost come to find themselves, where the broken come to heal, and where the forgotten come to remember their purpose." Morrison's mind raced through the implications. A hidden airfield in one of the most contested regions on Earth, operated by unknown forces with access to experimental aircraft and technology that exceeded anything in the official inventory. It was either the most sophisticated terrorist operation in history, or something else entirely, something that challenged every assumption about who controlled the skis and why. "Ghost Lead, identify your commanding officer and your mission parameters," Morrison demanded, his training overriding his amazement. "I need to know who I'm dealing with here." The response came back with what sounded like genuine amusement. "I am the commanding officer, Jake Morrison, and my mission is simple: to ensure that the debts of war are paid in full, and that those who serve with honor are never forgotten." Ghost Lead's aircraft touched down on the rocky runway with the precision of a pilot who had made this approach countless times. Morrison followed, his own landing heavy and awkward compared to the effortless grace of the mystery pilot. As their aircraft rolled to a stop, Morrison could see figures emerging from the concealed hangars, ground crew members who moved with the efficiency of a well-trained military unit. "Falcon Lead, shut down your engines and prepare for debriefing," Ghost Lead instructed, his aircraft taxiing toward one of the camouflaged hangars. "You are about to learn the truth about the pilot you saved, and the organization that has waited 7 years to thank you properly." Morrison's hands moved automatically through the shutdown sequence, his mind struggling to process the situation. He was in Pakistani airspace without authorization, at a facility that didn't exist on any official map, following a pilot who claimed to be someone he'd rescued from a burning aircraft 7 years ago. By any rational assessment, he should have been calling for extraction and preparing for a court-martial. Instead, he found himself curious about the truth that had been hidden in these mountains, about the pilot who had waited 7 years to repay a debt, and about the organization that had built a secret airfield in one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. The curve of destiny was revealing itself, and Jake Morrison was about to discover that some rescues created ripples that extended far beyond the moment of action. As his canopy opened and the mountain air rushed into the cockpit, Morrison could hear voices speaking in multiple languages, see figures moving with the purposeful efficiency of a military operation. This wasn't a terrorist training camp or a rogue operation. This was something far more sophisticated, far more organized, and far more dangerous than anything he'd encountered in his career. "Welcome to the sanctuary," Ghost Lead's voice carried across the airfield, spoken by a figure who had removed his helmet to reveal the scarred face of a man who had clearly seen too much war. Welcome to the place where the forgotten wage their own war against those who would destroy the innocent. Morrison climbed down from his aircraft, his legs unsteady on the rocky ground. The pilot approaching him was Middle Eastern, his features marked by old injuries, and his eyes carrying the weight of someone who had seen the worst of human conflict. But there was something else in his expression: gratitude, determination, and a quiet pride that suggested he had found something worth fighting for in this hidden valley. "My name is Colonel Ahmad Hassan," the pilot said, extending his hand in greeting. "7 years ago, you knew me only as a downed pilot in need of rescue. Today, I am the commanding officer of the most effective counterterrorism unit in the Middle East, and I owe my life and everything I have built here to your courage and your honor." The truth was beginning to emerge, and with it, the understanding that some debts transcended nations and ideologies, creating bonds that neither time nor distance could break. Morrison stared at the man before him, his mind struggling to reconcile the unconscious pilot he'd rescued 7 years ago with the confident officer who now stood before him. Colonel Hassan's face bore the marks of old injuries, a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, another that disappeared beneath his flight suit collar. His eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had looked death in the face and found the strength to continue living. "You were flying an experimental aircraft," Morrison said slowly, the memories flooding back. "Syrian airspace, a mission that officially never happened. Your F-16 was modified with technology I'd never seen before." Hassan nodded, his expression grave. "I was part of a joint operation between American and coalition forces, testing new counterterrorism capabilities. My aircraft was shot down by surface-to-air missiles, but not before I had gathered intelligence that would save thousands of lives. When you pulled me from that burning wreckage, you saved more than one man. You saved an entire operation." They walked together toward the main hangar, their footsteps echoing off the rocky walls. Morrison's eyes took in the details of the hidden facility, the sophisticated camouflage, the advanced communications equipment, the obvious signs of a well-funded and expertly managed operation. This wasn't some hastily assembled rebel base. This was a permanent installation built to support long-term operations. "The sanctuary," Hassan continued, "was built with the blessing of multiple governments and the support of intelligence agencies that cannot be officially acknowledged. We operate in the spaces between nations, targeting threats that conventional military forces cannot reach. Our pilots are drawn from every major air force in the world, men and women who have been declared dead, whose skills are too valuable to waste in official channels." Morrison's mind raced through the implications. A multinational force operating in secret, staffed by pilots who had been officially killed in action, but recruited for missions that exceeded the scope of conventional warfare. It was the kind of operation that existed in the realm of speculation and conspiracy theories, yet here it was, carved into the mountains of Pakistan with the precision of a military engineering project. "How many?" Morrison asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the magnitude of what he was seeing. 47 pilots from 16 different nations," Hassan replied, his voice carrying quiet pride. "Each one a specialist in their field, each one dedicated to the mission of protecting innocent lives from those who would destroy them. We have prevented 14 major terrorist attacks in the past 4 years, disrupted dozens of weapons shipments, and eliminated threats that would have destabilized entire regions." They entered the main hangar, revealing a sight that took Morrison's breath away. 20 aircraft sat in perfect rows, each one modified with technology that exceeded anything in the official inventory. F-16s, F-18s, Eurofighter Typhoons, and other aircraft he couldn't immediately identify, all bearing the same charcoal gray paint scheme and the same absence of national markings. "Ghost Squadron," Hassan said, nodding Morrison's amazement. We chose the name because we operate in the spaces between life and death, between official acknowledgement and necessary action. Each pilot here has been given a second chance to serve, to make a difference in a world that too often forgets the price of freedom. Morrison walked between the aircraft, his trained eye taking in the modifications and improvements. Advanced avionics, enhanced engine performance, weapons systems that belonged in research facilities rather than operational squadrons. The level of technology and funding required to support such an operation was staggering, suggesting support from sources that operated at the highest levels of government and military command. "Who funds this?" Morrison asked, his voice carrying the curiosity of someone who understood the massive resources required to maintain such a facility. Hassan's smile was enigmatic. "Let us say that there are those in positions of power who understand that some battles cannot be fought through official channels. The sanctuary receives support from many sources, all of whom share the common goal of protecting innocent lives from those who would destroy them." They stopped before a particular aircraft, its lines more familiar than the others. Morrison recognized it immediately. The same modified F-16 that had led him through the valley, the same aircraft that had demonstrated impossible performance characteristics during their aerial encounter. "This is my aircraft," Hassan said, his hand resting on the wing with the familiarity of someone who had entrusted his life to the machine countless times. "Modified with technology that allows it to exceed conventional performance parameters. The pilot becomes one with the aircraft, achieving capabilities that transcend normal human limitations." Morrison studied the aircraft, noting the subtle modifications that had enabled Hassan's impossible aerobatic display. Enhanced engine performance, improved aerodynamics, avionics that seemed to anticipate the pilot's intentions. It was technology that belonged in the realm of science fiction, yet here it was, operational and effective. "Why show me this?" Morrison asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood that knowledge came with responsibility. "Why risk exposing your operation to someone who could compromise everything you've built?" Hassan's expression grew serious, his eyes meeting Morrison's with the intensity of someone revealing a long-held truth. "Because 7 years ago, you saved my life without asking.